Hello everyone and welcome back to Light Channel Denmark. Today we are so blessed having Dr. Janie Unruh with us from Canada again. And she has been with us in two programs before, and she was telling her very interesting testimony how God was leading her from being an atheist to becoming a Christian. And when she was an atheist, she was working in the US Army for more than 7 years as a field medic. But when she became a Christian, she was called to become a missionary, as we all are when we become Christian. We don't need to go out in the field just like Janie was doing. We can be missionaries wherever we are. And she has actually been traveling to more than 30 countries, and most of them as a medical missionary to help the poorest of the poor. And she has also a master in public health, and she has been working with that for more than 20 years, telling people how to prevent and reverse disease through a whole food plant diet. She is also excuse me, a certified food teacher. And in a later program, she is going to talk to us, share with us how to do sprouting seeds and beans, how we do it, and all the nutrients which comes when we are doing that. And she is also certified blood analyst. But today she's going to tell more mission stories. In the first program, she's going to tell us experiences she had with the Lord when she was a missionary at the Amazonas River in Brazil. And in the next program, she's going to talk about experiences with the Lord when she was in Nepal and India for 9 months. So in the 3rd John verse 2, it says, "Beloved, I wish above all things that you may prosper and be in good health, even as thy soul prospered." Let's pray. Yes, Father in heaven, we are so grateful that you are such a good God, such a good Father. You hear us when we pray, and you have promised to guide us and show us the way we shall go. We thank you that as Christian, we get experiences with you, and that is what we are going to tell the people in the world, how you are changing our lives and using us. We are so grateful, Lord, that Jane is with us again, and that she will share testimonies from Brazil, testimonies from Nepal and India, to all these precious people there, Lord, who has never heard about you. We pray that you will bless her now that she's going to share, and that you will encourage those who are listening to her. We thank you, Lord, that you will bless. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hello, Eva and Michael. Thank you again for having me back. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with the world what God has done and that He truly is still in the business of doing miracles for us. And really, the boldness that I have does not come from me. The boldness comes from the Spirit of God. And so please don't look upon these stories like I am anything more than I am. I'm just a somebody who wants to share my experiences with the Lord. I'm somebody who wants to give my life to the Lord, and I just ask simple prayers of Him. I know for me in 2 Timothy 1:7, it has been a great encouragement for me when he says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." And so I give these stories to share God's goodness, nothing about me, because he answers to all of his people, for which I am so thankful for. So I like to first share some stories on the Amazon when I was in Brazil. It was many years ago by now, but it was certainly a huge turning point in my life. It's where I really learned to trust God, to grow my experience and my experimental relationship with God, where He really taught me on a day by day basis that I could trust Him. And I think that I have really come to love these situations that God puts me in where I must rely upon him. To me, they have really grown my love for him, grown my trust, grown my adoration, and I'm just so thankful for the spirit of God. So here are some stories about God. Life on the Amazon was very simple, where we had little options for food. We basically ate what was brought or given to us every single day. I bathed in the Amazon. I would, as the sun was going down, after I had done my nursing on the boat for the day, I would jump in my swimsuit and go to the back of the boat to the stairs, and I would then jump into the river and jump and get all wet, and I'd jump on the back of the boat again, and I would lather up and then jump in again. That was my bath for all that time, and I absolutely loved the simple life. The simple life, um, what was is quite different than when we here in North America. You can see in the previous slide where people live in huts. People live very simple but very beautiful real estate there. When boys are about 6 years old, their fathers and uncles and brothers, older brothers, all get together. They dig out a handmade canoe for each one of them on their sixth birthday. When they are about 7 years old, they are given a large knife, and then they are expected to learn to uh, fillet their fish and to prepare them for the family meal. They, at young ages, they are given responsibilities. As you can see, this little boy with an axe. They have very simple play games as well. They don't mind if it's muddy. They don't care what they have, whether it's a ball to play soccer or whether it's just a simple wheel of a bike. They know how to play games with anything. They're truly an amazing group of people. Life is simple. They often sit and chat with each other in windows, even the children do. The grocery stores are very simple. This is just a little mom pop stand, which is very common. Mode of transportation is the key is to get as many people on a motorcycle as possible. And I have actually ridden on motorcycles where there has been 3 adults and 2 children before. And so that makes it quite interesting. Life is also simple when it comes to gas stations. We think of gas stations as um, quite modern, but this is their routine gas station. They sell their gas just on the side of the road. Somebody will go purchase a bunch, put them in liter bottles, and sell them by the liter. People are very um, uh, proactive when it comes to trying to figure out a way to make money. They are not lazy people. They are ingenious. Actually, they literally will do whatever they have to in order to make their stay. This lady here is just working at a little store that she sets up. People just buy what they can and then they resell them to make a living. Hospitals were also very, very simple. This hospital here is was just a probably a 3 or 4 bedroom outdoor hospital, and their accommodations are very simple compared to ours. The animals there I come to love as one wild monkey actually, as I was looking at a cage of a caged monkey in a little zoo. This wild monkey, just jumped in my arms unprovoked, and he decided to share what was grooming practices for his own uh, group of monkeys. As you can see, children often groom themselves as well. There are abundance of fruit trees in Brazil. We've got mangoes, coconuts, we've got star fruit, papayas. I couldn't have asked for a more beautiful mission place to be. I just thank God so much for the experiences that He gave us. One such experience came with a great uh, inconvenience, which sometimes we don't quite understand. Inconveniences can be a real blessing. And when we give our day to God and we give Him the opportunity to take charge of our day and to interrupt it at any time, we should be expecting that He will do that. And here with this group of people is one such so-called inconvenience. This truly was a miracle story. So I had just gotten to Brazil. I had spent 2 weeks with some other missionaries from Loma Linda learning jungle nursing. We were learning the language, and I was just doing what I needed to do to kind of get my feet wet to kind of get grounded in Brazil. I'd never been to a place like this before, and it was a little unnerving, but I certainly was up for the challenge because I knew that God had led me there. I had no question. And if you had listened to my previous testimony of part number 2, then you will get to understand how I got to Brazil in just a miracle story. So what happened after my 2 weeks? Then um, during that 2 weeks, I should say, I learned that people on the furthest west of the Amazon, nobody speaks English. Uh, there's lots of pirates that jump ship, and that it was very hard to get supplies out there. And so I did not want to go out there because I didn't know Portuguese. And I just said to the pastor after my 2 weeks, and then he was going to assign me somewhere. He told me that I was going to Beijing, which is the furthest west of the Amazon, which was exactly where I said I didn't want to go. And I was terrified. I just did an about face. I turned and went down to my room in the mission house, and I got on my knees and I said, God, I can't do this. I'm scared to go down there, and I don't think I can do this. And as I'm complaining to God, telling him that I can't do this, the more I talk to him, the more he's subduing me and telling me, yes, you can do it, with his kind, gentle, soothing, strong voice. Eventually, he captured my heart, and my words of despair went to words of trust. And I said, okay, God, if you're going to send me there, then you've got to do everything for me. You've got to teach me jungle nursing. You need to teach me the language. You need to teach me everything, because I don't know anything. And how am I even going to get by when I don't know the language and nobody knows English? God, in his soothing way, he calmed me, and I accepted my lot. I went back up to the pastor and said, okay, so when do I leave? He he said that he was going to send me out on a boat, which was a 4-day boat ride, a river taxi ride to the furthest west of the Amazon, to Beijing. And then he decided against it. He thought that I was too green behind the ears to take on such a challenge. So he decided to put me on an airplane, a little tiny jumper airplane. It only probably held, say, 10 people or so. Very tiny, a little puddle jumper. So the next day I was off. It was only supposed to be an hour and a half or two. I don't remember. It wasn't a very long trip. It may have even been a 45-minute flight. Whatever it wasn't very long. I think it was maybe 45 minutes. And halfway there, we had barely even gotten in the air, and we were having engine problems. And when I heard that, I just immediately started to pray, because we were told that we were going to do an emergency landing. And I just said, oh God, please, am I going to die already? And I haven't even started my mission yet. So I just prayed for safety for all of us, and we safely landed. We were told we were going to be there maybe half an hour to an hour. It might take two, but we should be in the air shortly to our destination. So everybody exited the airplane, and they had outdoor seating at tables and chairs, like picnic benches almost, and picnic tables. And I went to go sit at one, and everyone pretty much went to go sit at their own table. Some people went to inside the very small terminal to get something to eat. So I just grabbed my backpack and my Bible, and I just went and sat at a table, just praying and thanking God for the safe trip, the safe landing, and asking, Lord, there's got to be a way that, if I'm going to be here for 45 minutes or an hour or two, then how can I share with these people on the plane? There's got to be a way that I can reach them. So I pulled out my dictionary, which was an English Portuguese dictionary. Keep in mind, I didn't know any Portuguese at that time. My trip had come very unexpected. If you had listened to part 2 of my testimony, you'll see that I really only had just maybe a week or two in order to prepare. And by the time it all happened, it just happened within days. Very unexpected. Just one miracle after another got me to the Amazon. So I'm sitting there with my dictionary and my Bible, and one lady, as you can see in the picture, in the group picture there's a lady to my left. And you can see that my arm is around her. She's the one there in blue. And she was the first one who came up and sat next to me. She sat with me at the table, and her and I started to communicate. And as she was asking me things in Portuguese, I would look words up, because, of course, I didn't know what they were. And I figured, okay, Lord, here's my crash course in learning Portuguese. I was handing her my dictionary as I was replying to her questions, so she could understand what I was saying. So we're passing my dictionary back and forth again and again. We are just having so much fun. We're laughing with each other. And then another man comes and sits by us, and that is the man that's kind of crouched down to my right knee. Now, that is her adult son. And then he started to converse with us. And then the three of us were talking, and then another person came, and another person came until everybody there in the picture was all at my table. We are all passing around my dictionary. We are having such a wonderful time. I'm telling them there that I am a missionary, medical missionary there doing humanitarian aid. And I was thinking I was going to be there for about 6 months. That was the plan. And during that time, then we all had lunch. We all really got to know each other through this dictionary that I had. And it was such a blessing. It ended up, we were there at the airport for 8 hours, stranded. Nobody knew where I was. I was worried about my endpoint, the people who were supposed to pick me up. I had no way to contact them. I had no way to contact the pastor. I just rested in the Lord, knowing that eventually somehow it would all get taken care of, and that the pastor and the endpoint who was supposed to pick me up, that they would somehow figure it out. So I didn't know the struggle that they were going through trying to find me, but I knew what I was going through, and I was having a lot of fun with this group. After 8 hours, or during that 8 hours, we just had so much fun together. We ate lunch together, we ate supper together, we conversed, and we stayed at all the same table. We all got to know each other and just had a wonderful, wonderful time. During At the end of that 8 hours, the plane was fixed, and we were able to get back on our flight again to the end of our destination, which was Beijing, the furthest west of the Amazon. Right there, where Peru and Colombia also meet the Amazon in that same area. So I'd spent my time there on the Amazon. I I will fast forward in this story because this story doesn't end there. What happened is I'd spent then the next 5 months on the Amazon. I was, um, you know, let me move forward 4 slides to where you see me in a hammock, and then I'll go backwards 3 slides, because I think that this would be a good point to actually mention something that is important for to end this story. So I was eventually picked up at the airport. They did not know what happened to me. The endpoint people who were supposed to pick me up just kept going back every half an hour trying to see if I was there. Nobody knew what happened to me, but eventually we did connect together. And that was the picture that we all took in the airport at our final destination. Here in the hammock, I was not very long in the on the Amazon. I had now been there several days. I had met the people that I was on the boat with. I had already been starting to see patients. And a few days into seeing my patients, I was very discouraged because I'm like somebody who wants a personal connection with my patients. I didn't want to hear through a translator of the issues that my patients were having, because to me, if pertinent information was left out from them telling me something or me telling them something through the missive translation, then I knew it could be a pretty bad situation. And my translator, she was wonderful. She didn't know a lot of English, but it was good enough. But yet, for my purposes, it was I needed much more. It it was that I wanted that personal relationship with my patients. I didn't want to have to go through somebody else to get to know them. And I found it very unsatisfying and very distant. So that night, when I went to bed, I knelt beside my hammock and I just said, God, I have to have a relationship with my patients. I have to know what they're saying, and they have to know what I'm saying. Would you please help me to learn this language expediently? Help me to learn it very fast. And I finished my prayer and I went to bed and I woke up the next morning and I could um, basically speak and converse with people in Portuguese on a very simple level, anything dealing with the Bible and anything dealing with medicine. And here I was then, now, that morning, the morning after I prayed, and I'd only been there probably 2 or 3 days doing nursing. And here I am now speaking in Portuguese to my patients. I just was, every word that I looked up in Portuguese, I immediately remembered. It just became part of my vocabulary. And by the end of a day or two, I hardly even needed any kind of a translation. I I just thanked God so much um, for that gift. I didn't realize though until I had already left the Amazon that God had given me the gift of tongues. I didn't even know what the gift of tongues were at that time. At that time, I just thought it was a bunch of babble. I thought it was people speaking in an unknown language. I um, I thought it was people, people basically speaking in another language and no one understanding it. Basically, I didn't understand. So I found out later that God had given me the gift of tongues. And by that time, I was reading in Portuguese. I was dreaming in Portuguese. It actually became my first language. I was conversing with everybody in Portuguese, and I was learning the language extremely fast. I then, to back up 3 pictures to the group where um, there's a bunch of us ladies, and one young lady is sitting on my lap. So from the picture of the airport, that is 5 months later now. What happened here is I had now been on the Amazon for 5 months, and I'm getting ready to leave the Amazon because my visa did not get renewed again. I I was just walking around the town and I heard somebody call my name from a distance down the road, and I said, I turned around and I had no idea who would have known me there. I was I already knew the people that I was on the boat with. I knew where they were, and I thought, who else could know me here? So I turned around, and it is the lady again who I had my arm around in the airport. She's the lady here in the red dress, the second one in from the right. The older lady there, that is the mother of these young ladies. And she came up to me, she ran up to me and she said, Janie, is that you? I said, yes, this is me. And she said, do you remember me? And I could not believe it, but yes, I remembered her from the airplane ride from when we got stranded. And so we talked and talked and eventually she asked me, she said, you speak really good Portuguese. And I told her, I said, well, thanks to the Lord, he gave me the understanding of Portuguese and it's become my first language. And she couldn't believe how well I could speak Portuguese. I I had uh, at that I knew that I was leaving within a couple of days, so I asked her if I could where she lived, and she asked me if I would like to come over later that day for supper with her family, or maybe it was the next night. I think maybe it was the next night. And so I showed up the next night to her home, and so this picture here is in her home. And I was only expecting her and possibly her adult son that you saw in one of the previous pictures. But instead, there was her with her adult son and all of her family. There were her other adult children. There were distant family members. There were a whole entire house of people. I couldn't believe it. So we enjoyed a really nice supper together. And then someone had asked me, "What is it that you're doing here?" And I said, "Well, I've been given Bible studies and doing nursing and helping people, doing humanitarian stuff." And they said, "The Bible. You know something about the Bible?" And I said, "I do. Or would you like to study something?" And they said yes. And I did bring my Bible with me, hoping that the conversation would go to this point. And so we all sat around the table, and I opened my Bible. I don't remember the topic of the Bible study anymore, but whatever it was, it really touched them. Every single one of them were engaged around that table and their eyes were engaged in that book. I just knew that God was working a miracle there. It truly was a memory to behold forever. And we finished our Bible study. We finished our conversations, and I left quite late that night. I was then invited to come back the next night. I had spent my day there on land again, went back the next night, and the same thing happened, except now there's even more people there. It's not just her and her extended family, but now there's a few extra people, and she's invited some friends as well. I just couldn't thank God enough for what he was doing. And they asked me if I would give them another Bible study. And I said, yes. What would you like to study? And I don't remember anymore what the study topic was, but whatever they told me, I was able to give that topic to them. And again, their eyes were just riveted on that book and the words that were read to them, scripture after scripture. And you could hear a pin drop that they were so interested. They were asking questions. They they were just kept asking for more and more and more. And I left late that night. She asked me again for the third night to come the next night, because then the following day after that would have been a day that I would have left to come back to America. So I went back for the third night, and again, they all wanted Bible studies. Entire group of people again, the extended family, a few friends. We shared a meal together, and we studied the word again. I found out the power of that book, of what it can do for people. And I finally said to them at the end of the Bible study, again, them asking multiple questions, everybody engaged, eyes riveted on that book. Beautiful story. And I could just see the joy that was happening in front of me with all of them. I I then at the very end asked if any of them would like to accept the Lord into their life. And I couldn't believe, but every single one of them, that whole entire family, came to know the Lord as their Savior. I just couldn't believe what God had done. Here in this next slide, this is the boat that I lived on for those 5 months. and with such special, special memories. This is up on a hill where I took this picture, and this was taken at a time when we were asked to come do some evangelistic series on a special, in a special village. It actually was, we had a pastor, the captain of the boat, and then another young lady missionary, and myself. So the four of us then were most of the time on that boat um, with just us. But there was a time when the captain of the boat, his wife joined us, and it was her sister from another village that asked us to come and hold evangelistic meetings. Now, keep in mind, at this time, a miracle had happened that got me to Brazil, but I was not an Adventist at that time. I was a born again Christian, totally in love with God, um, just happy in the Lord, and I do want to mention that because what happened was just another miracle. I so um, I am now, we're on land. We docked our boat, and every evening we are then heading to some meetings, and we're having to walk up a hill. And that up the top of the hill, then there are a bunch of homes up there, kind of like, very simple neighborhoods with simple homes and dirt roads. And then the church was, I don't know, maybe a 20 or 30-minute walk away. And we would um, often, you can turn the slide back. Yeah, there you go to the, yeah. And so on the top, we would often walk for 20 to 30 minutes to our church meeting that night. And that happened every night for probably a week or 10 days or something. By this time, I had been on the Amazon for a few months. I was getting really homesick. I just was desperate to speak English because I realized that in my mind I was losing my first language. I realized that when I was thinking in Portuguese. I was not retranslating into English as people said things to me. I was understanding the direct language without the English mediator. And all of my dreams were in Portuguese. And I could read the Bible and give Bible studies, and I had no problems with the Bible in Portuguese. And I realized that I am really losing my language. So I was just so homesick to speak English. And that night, again, I got down on my knees, and my prayer consisted of, Lord, I am so homesick. I just want to go home for a day and speak English and then bring me back again. Is that possible? I just want to speak English because I'm losing my mother language, and I'm not even thinking in English anymore. Please help me. I'm so homesick for something that is familiar to me. Well, that night, um, in fact, that was my prayer that morning. It wasn't a prayer at night. That was my morning prayer. And of course, I asked God to take charge of my day. And I always get permission to interrupt my day with things that I'm just doing naturally. And if He thinks that I need to be doing something else, being busy about my Father's business, doing something different, then I want to do that. And that morning was no different. So that morning, I went through the day after my prayer. That evening came, and we headed off to our meetings for the evangelistic series. I'm really feeling homesick by this time. I am so homesick that I just need I'm feeling the pull and the hurt to go home. After the evangelistic meeting that night, we were almost to the boat. Up at the top of that hill from our boat, there was a man within a fenced yard, and he said, "Hey, how where are you girls coming from?" And we told him that we were coming back from an evangelistic meeting, and he asked what church we were with, and we told him that we were with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and he said, "Well, we're having a party here at my house, and there's a whole bunch of friends inside the house. Would you like to come in?" Well, we kind of looked at each other, the other young lady missionary and I, who were walking together, and we shook our head and said, "No, that's okay. But thank you anyway." He obviously saw how uncomfortable we were, and when he realized that, he said, "Well, hey, why don't I bring all the chairs out and everybody can come out then?" And we looked at each other and said, "Okay, sure." So he went into the house and he grabbed everybody and told them what was up, that there was two young lady missionaries out in the front lawn, and he wanted everybody to come outside. So everybody brought their chairs outside, and we sat in a circle. And there was, I don't remember anymore, but there was maybe 10 or 15 people there, a good little crowd. And we're all talking in Portuguese, and they're asking what we're doing, and we're just talking as a group. And then um, a very familiar language came from two people to my right in a very unexpected surprise. There was a lady from South Africa, a black lady, a beautiful young lady that spoke very good English, and I couldn't believe it. My head spun around, and I just said, "You speak English?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I've been told that nobody on the furthest west of the Amazon speaks English. Is that not true?" And she says, "You're absolutely right." And she said that she was the only person that she knew of on the whole west of the Amazon that spoke English. The only person. She'd been living there for a few years, loved it, and had learned the language really quickly. And she spoke Portuguese quite fluently as well. So the person that was sitting in between us moved so we could sit next to each other. And there we sat for the next couple of hours just speaking in English. I was so happy. I was on cloud nine. I couldn't believe that I actually met someone who spoke English. After a couple of hours of sharing experiences and just being so happy, we, the other young lady missionary and myself, it was finally time to go because it was way after dark. And because by that time it was probably maybe 9 p.m. or even later. And it was dark because on the Amazon there it gets dark around 6 or 6:30 every night because it's really close to the equator. So the sun rising and falling doesn't really change too much. So that night I got on my knees to thank God, like I often do most of the time. I like to thank God for the events of the day. I like to go through the events of the day as I think about them again. I think about God's blessings. I just share with God my thankfulness and His watchful care over me throughout the day. And then a little light bulb came off in my mind that I was no longer homesick, but yet God provided for me the one and only person on the Western Amazon who spoke English. And it filled my heart so much. I was content and no longer homesick at all. That situation was what helped to carry me through the rest of my months on the Amazon. It truly, truly was a miracle that I knew that God had answered for me. And then there is, I should have had you advance the slides from there, Michael. So that is the Lucero that I was on, closer up. The evening meetings that we had are here in the next few slides. These are very simple buildings, unlike more in North America. And then there were baptisms that actually ended up. One of the pretty awesome things that happened while I was there at that meeting, where people were not appreciative of our group being there. Yes, we were invited to be there as Adventists, but keep in mind, I was not an Adventist at that time. God was working on me. I was learning the Bible truths at that time, because as we were going from one tributary to another, sometimes it would take 1, 2, 3, or on a rare occasion, even 4 days to get to the next place where I would do medical care for people. And during all of that time, I would fill my time with prayer and Bible study. And if you listen to part 2 of my testimony, I did not study with the Adventists, because some of my family told me that if I became an Adventist, that they would disown me. So I knew that I needed to have the Bible come to life for me, and I had to do my own studying. I did not want to study with the Adventists because I didn't want to be swayed in anybody's belief other than what was in the Bible. So I did a lot of praying. I did a lot of fasting during that time. God answered prayers in miraculous ways. He really taught me the depth of trusting Him, and of the simplicity of prayers, and how much He wants to answer prayers for us. That became so real. And in this picture here with these ladies, so the lady to the left was the young lady missionary on the boat with me. The lady to my on my right, to my left, actually, as I'm sitting down to my left, she is the pastor's wife. And then the lady to her left is the wife of the captain. And then the young girl sitting on her lap is the daughter of the pastor and the pastor's wife. And and then you'll see a fish here, and you'll see a very simple meal. Now, food was very simple for us. We did not have a lot of options. We basically ate what we were given or what somebody fished for us. We charged nobody on the Amazon for medical care. It was all for free. Wouldn't have even thought to even take money, but most people didn't even have money to begin with. They did a lot of bartering and trading with each other. And the as I was doing a lot of medical care on the sick people in the village, the men and young boys would then go out to their canoes and they would fish. And they would oftentimes, in lieu of money, they would hand us a bucket of water that had still breathing fish in it. Or one of the men would go down and chop off a gigantic branch of bananas, an entire branch. It was so heavy that I couldn't even carry it, or it sometimes took 2 men to carry this huge branch. Sometimes they would give us a fresh cut pineapple or papaya, coconuts, mangoes, whatever people had. That's that was basically what we lived off of. As as far as any kind of fresh food went, we had very little fresh food because we had no refrigerator. But what we did have was we had rice and beans. That was pretty much the staple of our diet. And then if we were lucky, we would get something else. And many times we would often have just 4 of us eating. Sometimes there might be, we'd make enough food for 4, and there would be 6 people or 8 people showing up. This one particular time is what this picture reminds me of, was a time when the lady to my right the young lady missionary, she and I were making a fish and a bowl of rice and a bowl of beans, just enough for 4 people. So this picture wasn't the exact picture of what happened because I never took a picture of that, but this is a representation. This was actually a pretty large fish compared to the story that I'm telling you about right now. The story that I'm sharing, the fish was probably about half that size because I had asked one time uh, what kind of fish it was that we were cooking all the time. And somebody told me that it was piranhas. And at that time, piranhas were, I mean, yes, I knew piranhas were in the Amazon, but were they at the forefront of my mind? Not at all. It wasn't even anything that I thought about. I just knew that God had called me there and and I believed that He wasn't going to let me die. Um, and so I just had no fear. And, and, and all I wanted to do was the Lord's work. I was so in tuned and so connected to God that even had I died, it just I was going to live life to the fullest. And at that moment of death, then I knew that I would have lived life to the best that I could. So at this one meal, Zina and myself, we had made a small pot of soup. I mean, beans, a small pot of rice, and we had this very small piranha to share between the 4 of us. That was her and me, the pastor, and the captain, just the 4 of us. And then we had another man came on board, and it was around mealtime. We were almost done, and the pastor and him were jolly talking and having a good time. And then the pastor said, "Hey, why don't you stay for supper?" And I'm thinking, okay, there's probably only barely enough for 4, maybe not even enough for 4, and now we're going to have 5 people eating. And then another man came on the boat, and then the pastor was speaking to 2 of them, and then I overheard him inviting him to the meal as well. And I was like, okay, so we now have 6 people eating. I then overheard him say to a couple more men that had walked on the boat to converse with the pastor, he invited them as well. And I'm thinking, oh boy, this is going to be something. He must not realize how little food we made, where there was barely enough for 4, and now he's invited 4 or 5 more people on. And now there's going to be 9 or 10 of us eating uh, enough for 4. And then as the minutes went by, this all happened pretty quickly. Several more men walked on board, and actually a few more ladies. And he invited all of them to eat with us. And I just kind of stood back in the background, thinking, okay, he really doesn't know how little food we have made here, because we couldn't afford to have leftovers because we had no refrigeration, and if anything was left over, we just had to throw it overboard to the piranhas. So here we are. We had, I wish I remembered anymore how many people we had, but it must have been close to 15 people. I don't remember counting everybody, but by the time all was said and done, we probably had at least 15 people um, that now had to feed, that we had to feed with this meal for 4. So the pastor, when we told him it was time to eat and the food was ready, he offered a prayer that changed my life, that changed the outlook and broadened my horizon in a whole new way to trust God. And I'm so thankful for that prayer, because in his prayer, he said, Lord, we don't have a lot of food here, but we have a lot of people. Would you please expand the food to where everybody gets enough? And I heard that prayer, and my faith was building at that time. And I'd already had my own experiences with the Lord, but this was totally a new realm for me, because now we're really talking about a Bible miracle, two of them, where Jesus had multiplied 4,000 and 5,000 people, enough food for 4,000 and 5,000 people. And so after the prayer, I just I told myself, now you can see in the picture, I'm not a heavy person. I'm not overweight. I didn't have any excess weight really. But as I looked around to the people and I compared my size to their size, I saw that though I wasn't a very big person myself, I saw that they had even less than me. And I just said, okay, God, I see that um, they can't go without food. I mean, it's not going to be a big deal if I go without food for a meal. So I'm going to be last. And if there's food, that's fine. And if there's not, that's fine as well. But I will let everybody get their fill first, which I knew only four people, the first four people would probably even get anything. So I'm having this conversation, the private conversation in my mind with the Lord. And I tell him that I'm just going to kind of hang back. I'm chatting with people, I'm being nonchalant and kind of pretending I'm not hungry, and I see people filling up plate after plate after plate after plate. And I'm, 5 minutes and maybe 6, 7 minutes waiting, and more people are going through, and I'm just kind of nonchalantly glancing at people's plates. And I notice that everybody's got a full plate full of food. And I'm a little confused in my thinking. And so I kind of nonchalantly look over at the table with the food, and I notice that there's still food left. And now I can't be helped but to be more obvious. I don't know if anybody was observing me at this time, but my eyes immediately went to everybody's plate when I saw that there was still food and still fish left on the table. And I'm thinking, how can this be? And I and so I'm observing everybody's plate. Everybody's thinking that this is no big deal. I'm thinking this is a miracle happening right before my eyes, and everybody's eating like this is no big deal. And I go over to the table. Now I'm not being so nonchalant. Now I go right over to the table. I look right into the pot of beans, the pot of rice, which were not very full. They were tiny pots. And I saw this little fish, and there was only just this little tiny bit missing from the fish. And the pots of rice and beans were as if they weren't even taken from. Because you can see a line when pots become empty, and there was no line. They were just as full as when I put them on the table. And I'm thinking, I can't believe that everybody is just chatting and as if this is no big deal, and I'm watching a miracle happen before me. So I in my mind again, I just said, wow, Lord, thank you so much. I actually can eat. I would have been fine not eating, but thank you for that. I had so much thankfulness in my heart after that. So I got to my plates full, and I noticed people going back for seconds. And now I'm kind of nonchalantly watching people again, and I noticed that almost everybody was going back for seconds. And me too, I was thinking, boy, it'd be really nice, to have a little bit more, because I didn't fill up my plate. Um, uh, because I really wanted everybody else to get enough food. So I took enough just to put some food in my belly, and to satisfy me and to know that I had eaten. I had noticed that everybody had taken seconds, and I'm just kind of nonchalantly looking at everybody again at their plates. And again, they're all just chatting as if nothing happened. And nothing's happening at the moment. I now then go over to the table, and I'm thinking, oh, it'd be nice to have a little bit more. And I go over, and there's still food left. Couldn't believe it. And now I know that there is a miracle happening right before me. And some people even went back for thirds. I had had enough after my second. I believe, I don't think I went back for thirds, but if I did, it would have only just been a tiny bit. And by the time I went back again, and everybody had had their fill, I went back and looked at the table, and all the fish was gone, all the rice was gone, and all the beans were gone. And everybody had had their fill, and many people, and I think maybe even I did, come to think of it, everybody had had thirds. Not everybody, most everybody just took small portions because there really wasn't a lot, but it was pretty obvious that everybody had had their fill, and everybody was being polite to one another so everybody could have food. But as it ended up, God provided an abundant amount of food for us. And so I thank God for those kinds of miracles. This Here I am. This next picture, the pastor is. I'm on the boat, and the pastor is saying goodbye to me. He is seeing me off to my destination, because now, if you remember, the original pastor um, in Manaus, he was going to send me by a 4-day river taxi. Now, this is the pastor I was actually with. And I'm taking a picture of him while I'm on the river taxi now, because now I've been there 5 months. He's saying goodbye to me. And so because now I know the language, it was a lot cheaper to take the river taxi and a lot more fun. So now I wanted to take the river taxi. And so we're saying our goodbyes. I took a picture of him, and we started to ride off. This next picture is actually the boat that we took off, or, that is the river taxi right there. Everybody put up your hammock, and everybody sleeps right next to each other. There are hammock hooks that are up on the ceiling, just every foot or foot and a half or so, every couple of feet, or not very far apart. And everyone stick up your hammock, and that's your home then for the next 4 days. This trip was amazing, because what happened is I was just reading my I was reading my Bible, and I said, "Okay, God, I have 4 days now. Um, I know that there's somebody on this boat who wants to know you. So would you please bring them to me? I'm going to sit here, read my Bible, and you bring them to me, because I don't know who needs to know you. So I'm just going to mind my own business for now and see who you bring." So I sat on the bench, and a young man about my age came and sat next to me. And he said, "Is that the Bible?" And I said, "Yes. Are you interested?" And he said, "Yes. Would you teach me?" I said, "Yes, I would love to. What would you like to study?" And he told me something I don't remember anymore. And I keep in mind now, during that whole 5 months, I lived and breathed the Bible. I Every single waking moment, I was reading, I was praying, I was fasting, I was studying. I was so immersed in my Bible that I knew it front and back. I could do a Bible study on the spur of the moment on pretty much any topic. Because I was really searching for truth in the Bible during this time. And you can watch my part 2 to understand what that all meant, and all of the truths that God had taught me during that 5 months that actually brought me to become an Adventist. So I studied with this man, and what I did with him was I wrote out a piece of paper, and I gave him homework. And I said, "So here's the deal. Here's your homework, and whenever you're finished, come back and we can study it out together again, and then I'll give you some more homework." And so we will study progressively at the rate in which you are comfortable with. And if you never come back again, then I'll know that that was your only Bible study that you wanted and you're done. He said, okay. And so he left. And then there was another young man about close to my age, and he said, he sat next to me again and he said, "Is that the Bible?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Will you teach that to me?" And I said, "Yes, I will. What would you like to study?" He told me a topic, or maybe I chose a topic, I don't remember. And we studied, and I did the same thing with him as I did with the first man. I wrote out on a piece of paper, I gave him some homework, and I told him, when you are as you are interested and as fast as you want to go through a study, you get this done and then come back to me and we'll work on the next one. So whether it's 1 hour or tomorrow or the next day or the last day or not at all, it's up to you. I leave the speed up to you and how fast you want to go. So we spent probably a good hour or more together again, just like I did with the first man. And he left. And immediately again, a third man comes and sits down. And he says, "Is that the Bible?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Are you a Christian?" And I said, "Yes." And we started talking about the Lord, and again, and I said, "Are you interested?" Or he told me he was interested in studying. So I asked him, "What would you like to study?" He gave me a topic, and we studied it. I I gave him the same homework as I did the first two men, wrote out on a piece of paper, said, "Come back when you're done, and come back at your own timing." I sent him off, and the first man had already come back now. As soon as I got done with the third man, the first one came back. And we started study number 2. We spent a couple hours together, and I gave him homework number 2 after that study. And the second man came back again. And now the third man never came back again during the whole time. People would come up to me during the next 4 days, and I would talk to them about the Bible, and those three men were really the only ones that I had really strong Bible studies with. I opened the Bible with many, I prayed with many, but they were one-time events. That third man, though we had a couple hours together, he was a one-time event as well. He never came back. However, that first man came back several times, and that second man was the miracle. What happened to him, he kept coming back again and again, a couple of probably several times a day. And he would come and ask questions as he was trying to do the homework that I had given him. And he would then go off to do his homework again. He'd come back, ask some more questions. I'd show him more scripture, and we kind of did this for the 4 days that we were on the river taxi. Man number 1, he came back several times. I studied with him, but it wasn't as intense as the second man. And at the end of I believe it was the third day, if I remember right, we were doing Bible study again. We were spending a lot of time together, on and off through the days. And here is one of the tables that we often had meals at, because at mealtime, this was there was only one table, if I remember right. And several of these men were ones that I had actually done Bible studies with. It was such an awesome opportunity. So at the end of day 3, if I remember right, this man, and man number 2, he came back to me, and as we're studying in the middle, he said, "Boy, you sure speak good Spanish." I said, "Oh, I don't know Spanish. I only know Portuguese." And he said, "Well, you're speaking Spanish to me right now." I said, "I don't know Spanish." And I said, "You're speaking Portuguese." And he said, "I don't know Portuguese." And I said, "Well, you're speaking it very well." He says, "I speak Spanish. That's my main language." And we were just kind of wondering about our comments to each other. We sat there in silence as both of our minds were just kind of working through this. And then we just kind of shrugged it off and couldn't explain it, and then really didn't think much farther of it, and then we just continued studying, me in Portuguese and him thinking he was speaking Spanish. The the next night, just as we were getting ready to land or dock, it was about, I don't know, an hour beforehand, 30 minutes beforehand. It wasn't very long beforehand. And he said, he came up to me and he approached me. He said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And I said, "Yes, have a seat." So we're talking and he says, "I have to tell you something." And I said, "Okay, what do you need to tell me?" And he said that I need to tell you that I'm a stowaway, and that I am illegal here in Brazil, and I'm Mexican. And I was like, "Okay, so what does that mean for me?" And he said that the chances are that there's a good possibility that there will be federal agents when we dock. And then he proceeded to tell me what to do. He said, "We've spent a lot of time together on this trip, and I don't want you to get in trouble. So what I need you to do is just have your papers in hand, your passport, and I need you just to sit here. Um, I'm I don't want you to get in any trouble for being with me, and I don't want anyone to think that you had anything to do with this. So I just need you, if they come up to you, show them your papers and answer whatever questions they have for you, and just be honest about it." And I said, "Okay." And uh, and then I prayed for him, and I prayed for the Spirit of God to be in him, and ask God to lead him and give him the peace that he needs when we dock, and if the federal authorities are there. We docked, and sure enough, the federal authorities were there. So as we docked, the federal authorities were there. He got up willingly, knowing that he was the one that they were after. I just sat there peacefully with my passport in my hand, and not knowing what was going to happen to him, just praying and praying and praying. I I had Nobody did approach me, but I did watch him walk peacefully and gracefully off the taxi boat. I watched him walk right into the hands of the authorities, and I saw them handcuff him, and I saw him look back at me, and we connected eyes. And at that moment, I knew he was born again. I knew that God would take care of him no matter what happened to him. Fast forward that story, and by a few years or several years, I don't remember anymore, but it was several years that went by, and I got a letter in the mail. And I opened up the letter and I read it, and it was from this man asking if I remembered him from the boat, the river taxi on the Amazon. Of course, I did remember him. Fear struck me, wondering how in the world he could have ever found me. And I read the letter more with fear than with thanksgiving, and I'm so sorry for that now. I read the letter, and he said that he was now out of prison, that he actually did go to prison, and he had just gotten out several years later. And he wanted to thank me for the Bible studies that I gave him and for introducing him to the Lord. And during those years, he had a very, very vibrant ministry of sharing the Lord with people. And he it was I wish I would have not thrown the letter away. I wish that I would have kept it near and dear to my heart. And I sometimes I've given this story publicly, hoping at some point he would hear this, because I know that God would have brought him into truth. And I am just so thankful for all of the information, all of the miracles that God has provided for me. There are more miracles, there are more experiences, and there were many more pictures that I could have shared. But here was just a taste of some of the things that God had done for me. And I am grateful for the both experimental and experiential relationship that Christ offers to each one of us. And may his name be glorified before each and every single one of us. And God bless.